architect Divya Chakravarti. She completed her undergraduate studies from SRM University and she went on to pursue her master's in historic preservation and urbanism and study of the built environment from the University of California, Los Angeles. She went on to work for the Department of Planning and Preservation for the city of Pasadena, California. She also did a brief stint of work for Historic Scotland, Edinburgh, UK. She also worked on conservation projects like Kalsa Mahal, Gokhale Hall in Chennai, and Marimalappa Educational Trust in Mysore. She is currently working as a director of Samrakshan Heritage Consultancy. She is also a co-founder of the Artisan Reprisal of Traditional Materials, Method and Technology. She goes on to conduct workshops to revive traditional and lost methods of construction.
Welcome to the UGC lecture series for Bachelors of Architecture. The subject we are discussing is Human Settlements Planning. The topic we will be delving into is planning concepts. Contents: in this lecture we will be discussing planning concepts and their relevance to Indian planning practice, Ebenezer Howard and his contributions towards planning, Patrick Geddes and his contributions towards urban planning. Before we delve into planning concepts, let's take a quick overview of what is exactly town or urban planning. According to Aristotle, a city should be built to give its inhabitants security and happiness. People have the right to the city, a place where men had a common life for a noble end. This was said by Plato, and town planning is a mediation of space, making of a place. So what exactly is town planning? It is a combination of both an art and a science of ordering the use of land and siting of buildings and communication routes so as to secure the maximum practical degree of economy, convenience and beauty. An attempt to formulate the principles that should guide us in creating a civilized physical background for human life, whose main impetus is thus foreseeing and guiding change. It is an art of shaping and guiding the physical growth of town, creating buildings and environments to meet various needs such as social, cultural, economic, recreational, etc., and as well as to provide healthy conditions for both the rich and the poor to live, work, to play or relax, thus bringing about the social and economic well-being for the majority of mankind. So if you look at the different components of town planning, you have a well-balanced social economic development. There should be an improvement in quality of life, responsible administration of resources as well as environmental protection and rational use of land. It's very important that we give importance to the protection of the environment, because if that does not take place, later that will be the main cause of decay of any town or urban scenario. It's a combination of physical, social and economic planning of an urban environment. It encompasses many different disciplines and brings them all under a single umbrella. The simplest definition of urban planning is that it is the organization of all elements of a town or other urban environment. So if you look at the other components within town planning, you have the physical, which is nothing but the built environment, social, which is man's environment, behavior, everything with respect to his needs, cultural, it's both spiritual environment as well as entertainment, economic, financial environment, political is ideological in the sense that would give the spine or the support of a good, well-developed urban scenario. Ecological, natural environment, very crucial but mostly ignored. What happens if planning was not there? You would have uneven and chaotic development, contrasting urban scenario. If you look at this, this is a completely not planned environment. It's just slums built over a period of time, inorganically settled in, mixed land use, industries springing up in residential zones, which again leads to unhealthy living and other such problems, congested transportation network where you have overflowing traffic than expected. That usually happens in most cases because the projected population and the current population are never to be the same. It is always exponentially larger, and when the infrastructure is not there to support this population explosion, there is always congestion caused in the streets and other transportation networks. What is the role of planners? First is to consider human communities are always in the process of changing. Second, to recognize the complexity of communities. And finally, the concern about the future, the growth of a city. Before, when it was just a basic settlement, then gradually how it can grow. This could be considered a rural emergence, and finally, when there is industries and other such ancillary support, how does a city actually grow? It is to consider, recognize, as well as having concern about the future is the main category of what a planner will bring forward. We'll start with discussing the garden city concept. This was put forward by Sir Ebenezer Howard. It was one of the most potent planning models in the Western urban planning scenario. It was created in 1898 to solve the problems both urban as well as rural. It was the source of many key planning ideas during the 20th century. If you look at the main timeline and the important dates, this was put forward in 1888, and then about 1899 was published as a Garden City of Tomorrow. The Garden City Association was formed, and first town that was designed on this was Letchworth in 1903. And then 1920, Welwyn was another town that was designed. 1947, we studied the concept, how it grew over a period of time in both Letchworth and Welwyn. And then gradually it moved to other parts of the world. The garden city is basically an impressive concept of having three different magnets. You have the town magnet, the country magnet, and the town country magnet. And obviously people preferred the third one, which is mainly the town country magnet, which offered the benefits of both the town as well as the rural living. The clean living of living in a rural environment with clean air, water and surroundings, with a lot of greenery, and with the advantages of living in an urban scenario with good jobs, good wages and good entertainment sources as well as good social living. So that was the garden city concept. If you look at the concept, it provided for a strong community, order, development, environmental quality. So that was the three benefits of both combining the urban as well as the rural scenario. These were achieved by unified ownership of land to prevent individual land speculation and maximize community benefit, careful planning to provide generous living and working space while maintaining natural qualities, social mix, which is of both good community facilities as well as different social groups, limits to growth of each garden city, local participation in decisions about development. So what usually happened was individual garden cities were created and an entire network could be created to such that there would be communication within these garden cities as well as a kind of strong community would come forward. If you look at affordability, he wanted the garden city for all economic groups, for the poor as well as the rich. Most originally, it is obviously suited for the middle income or the modest income groups. Their attractiveness as living environments has often made them become more popular because with the middle class, upper middle class as well as the richer classes. If you look at the examples of modest income group garden cities, you have the Kapiala in Finland, Colonel Light Gardens in Adelaide, Australia, and Prague, Czech Republic is another example. But because of the combination of both the urban as well as the rural scenario, it is often most preferred by the upper middle class and the richer economic class groups because it has the best of both worlds and because it's a better suited environment for their kind of living. We'll see how this was applied in Letchworth in United Kingdom. This was 35 miles away from London. So it is little away from the city but not completely away such that you cannot travel to London. It was chosen around a site of 3,822 acres. There was a reserved green belt around, which is 1,300 acres. Population set aside was for 35,000 people, and that was an upper limit. So once that limit reaches, the whole concept was another garden city should come up linking to this. So in about 30 years, it actually grew with 15,000 population and 150 shops and industries. So it was not a very good model as such, because the population dropped and people actually preferred living in London, which gave them better resources in terms of jobs and social environment. The next town this was applied at is in Welwyn. This is about 24 miles away from London. The site chosen was 2,378 acres, and the population set aside for this was 40,000 population, but this again dwindled to 10,000 in 15 years and 50 shops and industries. So basically it was again not a very successful model, because the drop in population as well as the industries occurred. Now we will discuss how garden city concept was applied in India and the relationship ends with. Garden city principles greatly influenced the design of both the colonial as well as post-colonial capitals during the early part of the 20th century. This is the case for New Delhi, and New Delhi was actually designed as the new capital of British India after World War I. Lutyens led a group of architects in laying out the central administrative area of the city, with charge of retaining 1/3 of the area as a green space, which is similar to what Ebenezer Howard put forward. At the heart of the city was the impressive Rashtrapati Bhavan, also known as the Viceroy's house in the past, and this was located on top of Raisina Hill. The Rajpath, also known as the King's Way, connects India Gate to Rashtrapati Bhavan, while Janpath, which crosses it at right angles, connects the South End Road with the Connaught Place. Connaught Place proved to be the commercial district. The Secretariat building, which houses various ministries of the government, including the Prime Minister's office, is beside the Rashtrapati Bhavan, and this was designed by Herbert Baker. Also designed by Baker was the Parliament House, the Sansad Marg, which is running parallel to the Rajpath. So if you look at the initial design of New Delhi, the streets were all at right angles, much like it was seen in other cities in New York, which was earlier designed. But Lord Hardinge told him that the dust storms, which were very much prevalent in Delhi during summers, the loos, would actually not help the atmosphere. So they actually introduced these roundabouts so that the angles would change and include a lot of trees and hedges so as to break the force or offer resistance to the sandstorms. So a lot of other plans were referred to, like the plans of Rome, Paris and Washington, such that those plans were applied to that of New Delhi. If you look at the settlement pattern, it was very different. These roundabouts were included, and within the roundabouts again the roads were at 30 to 60 degrees, and what usually happened was everything was triangular or hexagonal. This, and then you had about the use of the roundabouts. Because the roundabouts were created, the road angles also automatically changed, creating hexagonal and triangular patterns. What were the intentions of the layout? Number one, it was planned on the most spacious garden city lines with great avenues decorated with classical buildings with lush landscapes. The layout of Lutyens Delhi was governed by 3 major visual corridors linking the different government complexes, because they wanted this to be a portrayal of the British India or the new India under the British rule. So you had one side, you had the Jama Masjid, the Indraprastha and the Safardang tomb. So these were the 3 old monuments, and keeping these in mind, they wanted this to comply with the new India monuments. So they had the Parliament House, the Rashtrapati Bhavan as well as the India Gate. So all of this was the new monuments of the 20th century with respect to the British India. If you look at the features of Lutyens Delhi, it reflects the transcendent fervor for geometric symmetry, which is expressed through amazing sequences of triangles and hexagons through both the sight lines as well as axis. It's so obvious the importance that he gives to geometry. Even though including roundabouts, which should have actually created a radial city, he has gone out of his way to ensure that it would only be triangular or hexagonal layouts. It is also remarkable for the generous green spaces, lawns, watercourses, flower and fruit bearing trees, and their integration with the parks that have developed around the monuments. So he wanted to give an impression of a flourishing Delhi, and there is nothing more impressive than showing green luscious trees, fruit bearing trees and flower bearing trees to show a positive atmosphere that yes, this part of India that under the British rule is thriving and going on well. The attempt was to include all natural and historical wonders in the new city. This is Connaught Place, the commercial district, again built around about here, and it was only here to aid in the whole concept of market trade that the radial patterns of road were introduced, because here it was supposed to be more pedestrian friendly where people would walk in and out of markets. So over here pedestrian friendly circular roads were introduced. The yellow points that you see over here are the traffic nodes, and the black points are the main traffic and railroad junctions, and finally the inner circles that we see with the green nodes are the pedestrian and vehicular junctions. And because it was predominantly pedestrian activity, radial roads were chosen because then the layout would be more compact and easier to walk. With respect to the layout, the drawbacks, in this whole process almost no attention was paid to the problems of Old Delhi. Due to the creation of New Delhi, Old Delhi experienced a 28% surge in population from 1916 to 1926, resulting in the spilling over of the population from inside of the walled city to Paharganj area, whose restructuring was later abandoned by Lutyens due to resource constraints. Also, no provision of housing was premeditated for the large number of skilled and unskilled workers who had immigrated to work on the construction sites of New Delhi. This negligence of the planners towards Old Delhi resulted in the transformation of large slum areas through complete deterioration and dilapidation around the New Delhi. So like we could just discuss, these are the main axis lines, clear axis importance given to the views and the vistas. Monumental buildings were given more prominence, and you can see there is no shortage of green spaces, especially around the monuments. This is again the avenue leading to India Gate and Rashtrapati Bhavan. This was the layout that was wanted. With respect to the plan for Washington compared to that of New Delhi, it's very similar in terms of the axis and the kind of layout that was there. Linear plan, bilaterally symmetrical, central visual axis, and all the roads cut each other at 90 degrees. Now moving on to Geddes and conservative surgery, the theory proposed by Patrick Geddes. He was a biologist, a sociologist, a geographer, as well as a town planner. So if you look into Patrick Geddes, he was a Scottish biologist and he was a pioneering town planner. He was actually known for his innovative thinking in the fields of urban planning as well as sociology. He introduced the concept of region to architecture and planning and coined the term conurbation. Geddes was the founder of the Collège des Escrans, Scots College, an international teaching establishment in France. He studied at the Royal College in London under Thomas Henry Huxley between 1874 and 1878. His principles for town planning in Bombay demonstrate his views on relationship between social processes and spatial form. So his involvement with India happened much earlier on as compared to the other planners from the West. And he had intimate and casual connections between the social development of individual and cultural as well as the physical environment. So all of his theories are actually part of the Bombay Town Planning Act of 1915. Preservation of human life and energy rather than superficial beautification. Conformity to an orderly development plan carried out in stages. Purchasing land suitable for building or construction. Promoting trade and commerce. Preserving historic buildings and buildings of religious significance. Developing a city worth of civic pride, not an imitation of European cities. promoting the happiness, health and comfort of all residents rather than focusing on roads and parks available only to the rich. Control over the future growth with adequate provision for future requirements. With respect to his concept, he explained an organism relationship to its environment is always such as follows. The environment acts through function upon the organism, and conversely the organism acts through the function upon the environment. He was one of the only few planners to stress in the very beginning, even before we started to hamper and destroy the environment, that what we were doing was actually going in the wrong path. We have to be more environment and eco-friendly for our urban plans to actually function well, and for all the people and the residents living in those cities to have a good, comfortable life. In human terms, this can be understood as a place acting through climatic and geographic processes upon which people are then shaping these principles. At the same time, people act through economic processes such as farming and construction on a place and thus shape the place. So, both place and folk are linked through work, are in constant transition. So, these three elements are the basic Gedesian trio representation. Folk or people, place in which they work as well as go for recreation, and finally work. So, this is the Gedesian triad that he came up with, and these three elements and the relationship to each other is what decides the character of any urban scenario. He was influenced by social theorists such as Spencer and Frederick Laplace, and expanded upon earlier theoretical developments that led to the concept of regional planning. He actually adopted Spencer's theory, and the concept of biological evolution could be applied to explain the evolution of society, and drew on Laplace's analysis of the key units of society as constituting place, work, family. But what he changed was little bit was from family he made it folk, because family was even more constraining to an individual dwelling unit or an individual person. But what he wanted to say is that as an entire community, all members of the community or all people are involved, and in this theory the family is viewed as a central biological unit of human society. So, he referred to this as folk. According to Geddes, it is from stable, healthy homes providing the necessary conditions for mental and moral development that come beautiful, healthy children who are able to fully participate in life. So, he actually thought of introducing at a very early stage the environment, sociological reasoning as well as urban planning are all interconnected and cannot be seen as mutually exclusive elements that do not affect each other at all. And the next thing he came about was his idea of the valley section. He first published this idea in 1909 to illustrate his idea of region city. The region is expressed in the city, and the city spreads influence of the highest level into the region. So, what he decided was it is not possible physically to plan the entire city and expect it to change overnight. So, he said let us bring down the element to regions or zones, and once we have a region, it is easier for us to plan and anticipate the changes in that region, and as a whole it will affect the city and vice versa. As more and more regions emerge like this in a planned fashion within a city, the city too will get influenced and develop in a better fashion, and will inversely and conversely help the development of individual regions as well. Geddes said that it takes a whole region to make the city. The valley section illustrates the application of Geddes' triology of folk, work, place to analysis of the region. The valley section is a complex model which combines physical condition, that is geology, geomorphology and their biological associations, with so-called natural or basic occupations such as miners, hunters, shepherds or fishermen, and with the human settlements that arise from them. The next term he came about was conurbation, which is the next level of a city. He decided that city is not the end of the urban settlement classification. There is something more than a city, and the term he came up with is conurbation. The term conurbation was coined in 1915 in his book Cities and Evolution. Internationally, the term urban agglomeration is often used to convey a similar meaning to conurbation. He drew attention to the ability, the new technology of electric power and motorized transport. With respect to 1915, these were obviously new technologies to allow cities to spread and agglomerate together, and gave us examples like Middleton in England, Ruhr in Germany, Ramstad in Netherlands, New York and Boston in United States, Greater Tokyo area in Japan, and NCR of Delhi in India. So, all of these are examples of what he thought of as conurbation theories. A conurbation is a region comprising of a number of cities, large towns and other urban areas that through population growth as well as physical expansion have merged to form one continuous urban and industrially developed area. In most cases, a conurbation is a polycentric urban agglomeration in which transportation has developed to link areas to create a single urban labor market or travel to work area. The term is used in North America. A metropolitan area can be defined by the Census Bureau, or it may consist of a central city and its suburbs, while a conurbation consists of adjacent metropolitan areas that are connected with one another by urbanization. So, conurbation was a very important concept that Geddes brought forward. In India, if we look at the examples, Mumbai Metropolitan Region or MMR is a metropolitan area consisting of the metropolis of Mumbai and its satellite towns. This has been developing over a period of 20 years and obviously not overnight, and it consists of 7 municipal corporations and 15 smaller municipal councils. The region has an area of about 4,355 square kilometers and a very massive population exceeding about 20 lakhs. It is among the top 10 most populated urban agglomerations of the world. It is linked with Mumbai through the Mumbai suburban railway system and a large network of roads. The National Capital Region is another example. The NCR is a name for the conurbation or metropolitan area which encompasses the entire National Capital Territory of Delhi as well as urban areas ringing it in neighboring states of UP, Haryana and Rajasthan. With a total area of about 33,578 square kilometers, it has an estimated population of more than 21 lakhs, and this was in 2007. The next thing is the constellation theory that he came about with. Within the state of Maharashtra, how the development pattern would occur and would create a kind of zone or a constellation that could be compared to that of a linking of stars. As well as we saw just now on the map, prominent cities in Maharashtra are shown to be connected, forming a constellation shape. This theory was also coined by Geddes, such that 4 or more cities which are not economically, politically, socially equal come together in developing a whole region. This theory is mostly used for administrative purpose in all countries worldwide. Such a theory is most prominently used because planning cities in a particular shape or pattern is possible in actually today's times. At the end of this lecture, we have studied the planning concepts and their relevance to Indian planning practice, Ebenezer Howard and his contributions. We have also looked into Patrick Geddes and his contributions. At the end of this lecture, we should be able to answer the following questions. What is planning? What are the basic characteristics of planning? What is the role of planners? Discuss the garden city concept. And what is conurbation? That brings us to the end of this lecture. Thank you.